The silk sheets were stained with red. Gabriel stood frozen beside the bed, his chest tight, breath caught somewhere between his ribs and his throat. 7 times that night, 7 times they'd reached for each other like they were drowning and the other was air. And now this. Isabella's eyes went wide with a fear he'd never seen before. Not panic. Something older. Something she recognized. She pressed a trembling hand to her abdomen and whispered words that shattered him. This isn't normal. A day, what began as a quiet afternoon in a coffee shop, 2 strangers, 1 empty chair, had unraveled into something deeper than either of them planned. But love, real love, doesn't come without scars, and sometimes it demands a price neither of you saw coming. If this story moves you, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? Your support keeps this space alive. The rain came down in sheets that Thursday afternoon, turning the streets of Baltimore into rivers of grey. Gabriel Mercer sat by the fogged window of the Harbor Brew Café, watching the world blur into streaks of colour and motion. His coffee had gone cold 20 minutes ago, but he hadn't noticed. He was good at not noticing things lately, especially the hollow ache that had taken up residence in his chest since the divorce papers were signed. The cafe smelled like roasted beans and cinnamon, with a faint undertone of wet wool from the coats piled near the door. The hiss of the espresso machine punctuated the low murmur of conversation. Gabriel liked it here. It was the kind of place where no one cared who you were. No one knew his name. No one wanted anything from him. He traced a finger along the window cutting through the condensation and wondered, not for the first time that day, what the hell he was doing with his life. That's when the door opened. She came in like a gust of wind, shaking rain from her dark hair, her arms wrapped around a stack of medical textbooks that looked ready to topple. Her scrubs peeked out from beneath a thin jacket that was doing a terrible job of keeping her dry. She was soaked, exhausted, and somehow impossibly radiant. Isabella Hart didn't notice him at first. She was too busy scanning the packed cafe, her brown eyes darting from table to table, hope draining a little more with each occupied seat. Gabriel watched her shoulders sag, watched her bite her lip, watched her almost turn around and leave. "Excuse me," she said softly, suddenly standing beside his table. Her voice was warm, a little breathless. "Is anyone sitting here?" Gabriel looked up. Their eyes met, and something inside him, something he thought had died months ago, stirred. "No," he said, clearing his throat. "It's all yours." "Thank you." She set the books down with a soft thud and peeled off her jacket, draping it over the back of the chair. Her scrubs were navy blue, wrinkled from a long shift. There was a coffee stain near the collar. She smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Gabriel returned his gaze to the window, pretending to be absorbed in the rain, while Isabella pulled out a notebook and flipped it open. But he could feel her presence, solid, grounded, real, in a way that made the cafe feel smaller, warmer, less lonely. She ordered a black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just coffee. Gabriel found that oddly comforting. "Long day?" he asked, surprising himself. She glanced up, startled, then smiled, a tired, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "You could say that. Let me guess. Nurse?" "How'd you know?" She gestured at her scrubs with a wry grin. "Was it the subtle fashion choice?" He laughed. It felt strange. "Good. Call it a hunch." "I see you," she said, taking a sip of her coffee and wincing at the heat. 12-hour shift, and I've got 3 hours of studying ahead of me before I can even think about sleep." "What are you studying?" "Advanced cardiac care. I'm working toward my certification." She tapped the top book, a thick tome titled Critical Care Nursing, Diagnosis and Management. "It's brutal, but worth it." Gabriel leaned back in his chair, genuinely curious now. "Why cardiac care?" Isabella paused, her fingers curling around the coffee cup. Her expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across her face before she answered. Because the heart is everything, literally. If it stops, everything else stops. And if you can restart it, if you can bring someone back from that edge. She trailed off, shaking her head. Sorry, that probably sounds dramatic. No, Gabriel said quietly. It sounds like you care. Her eyes met his again, and this time they held. There was something unspoken in the air between them. A recognition, maybe. A sense that they were both carrying something heavy, and for just this moment, they didn't have to carry it alone. What about you? She asked, tilting her head. What brings you to a coffee shop on a rainy Thursday? Gabriel hesitated. He could tell her the truth, that he was a real estate mogul worth more than most people saw in a lifetime. That he'd just closed a deal that would put another building on the Baltimore skyline. That he had everything and felt nothing. But he didn't. Just needed to get out of my own head for a while, he said instead. Isabella nodded, as if she understood completely. I get that. They fell into conversation then, easy and unforced. She told him about a patient, a young man, barely 25, who'd coded twice that week and somehow pulled through. Gabriel told her about his love of architecture, carefully skirting around the specifics of his work. They talked about the city, about favorite books, about the strange comfort of rain. An hour passed, then another. The cafe around them emptied and refilled. The rain didn't let up. At some point, Isabella checked her phone and gasped. Oh my God, I've been here for almost 2 hours. I haven't even opened my textbook. I'm sorry, Gabriel said, though he wasn't, not even a little. Don't be. She smiled, and it was different now. Softer, warmer, tinged with something that felt like possibility. This was really nice. Gabriel felt his pulse quicken. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt nervous around someone. Can I see you again? Isabella blinked, clearly caught off guard. Then her smile widened. Yeah, I'd like that. They exchanged numbers. She gathered her books, pulled on her damp jacket, and stood. But before she left, she turned back to him, her hand resting lightly on the table. Gabriel, she said, testing his name on her lips. Thanks for letting me sit here. Any time, Isabella. She walked out into the rain, and Gabriel watched her go until she disappeared around the corner. Then he sat back, staring at his phone, at her name glowing on the screen. For the first time in months, the hollowness in his chest felt just a little bit smaller. 3 days later, Gabriel found himself standing outside the Baltimore Museum of Art, checking his phone for the 4th time in 10 minutes. He'd suggested the museum, neutral ground, quiet enough to talk, interesting enough to fill any awkward silences. But now, waiting under the grey October sky, he wondered if he'd made a mistake. Maybe she'd changed her mind. Maybe she'd realized he was just another lonely divorced guy looking for distraction. Then he saw her. Isabella came up the stone steps, wearing jeans and a cream-colored sweater, her hair pulled back in a loose ponytail. She looked different outside the cafe, less exhausted, more present. When she spotted him, her face lit up, and something in Gabriel's chest unclenched. Sorry I'm late, she said, slightly breathless. The bus took forever. You took the bus? Gabriel asked before he could stop himself. She laughed. Not all of us have cars in the city. Parking's a nightmare anyway. He made a mental note of that, the casual mention of not having a car, the ease with which she said it. There was no shame, no apology, just fact. They walked through the museum slowly, drifting from room to room. Isabella stopped in front of a Matisse, tilting her head as she studied the bold blocks of color. Gabriel watched her instead of the painting. What? She asked, catching him staring. Nothing, just, you really look at things. Occupational hazard, she said with a small smile. In the ICU, you learn to notice everything. A slight change in color, a rhythm that's off by half a beat. Details matter. They moved to a bench in front of a wall of modern abstracts. For a while they just sat, surrounded by other museum-goers who passed like ghosts. "Can I tell you something?" Isabella said quietly. Gabriel turned to her. "Of course." She took a breath, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "I lost a patient 2 nights ago. A kid, 19 years old. Motorcycle accident." Gabriel felt his stomach tighten. "We did everything," she continued, her voice steady but strained. "Everything. 2 hours of compressions, 3 rounds of epi, advanced airway, but his injuries were too severe, and when we finally called it—" She paused, swallowing hard. "His mother collapsed, just collapsed. And I had to stand there and watch her world end." Gabriel didn't know what to say. He reached over and placed his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. "I'm sorry," he said. "It's part of the job," Isabella said, but her voice cracked on the last word. "But it never gets easier. You'd think it would after a while, but it doesn't." "Maybe it's not supposed to," Gabriel offered. "Maybe the day it gets easy is the day you stop being good at it." Isabella looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something shift in her expression. Gratitude, maybe, or recognition that he wasn't going to try to fix it with empty platitudes. "What about you?" she asked after a moment. "What keeps you up at night?" Gabriel hesitated. He'd gotten so good at deflecting, at keeping conversations surface level, but sitting here with her, in this quiet corner of the museum, he found he didn't want to do that. "Regret," he said simply. "About what?" "About—" He exhaled slowly. "I got divorced 8 months ago. And the worst part isn't that it ended. It's that I wasn't surprised. We built this whole life together, house, careers, routines. But somewhere along the way, we stopped actually seeing each other. We became roommates, business partners, and I let it happen. I threw myself into work, told myself it was fine, that marriage was supposed to settle into something comfortable." He laughed bitterly. Turns out comfortable was just another word for dead. Isabella was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Do you miss her?" "No," Gabriel admitted, "and that's what keeps me up, that I don't." They sat with that truth between them, heavy, honest, raw. "I haven't dated anyone in 3 years," Isabella said suddenly. "Not because I don't want to, but because I don't know how to fit another person into my life. Between the hospital and school and trying to keep my head above water financially, there's just no space. And every time I think about making space, I get scared. Scared that I'll choose wrong, scared that I'll lose myself trying to make it work." Gabriel turned to face her fully. "Is that what you think relationships are? Losing yourself? Isn't that what happened to you?" He considered that. "Maybe. Or maybe I never really knew who I was in the first place." Isabella smiled sadly. "That's the scariest part, isn't it? Realizing you've been living someone else's version of your life." "Yeah," Gabriel said softly. "It really is." They left the museum as the afternoon light began to fade. Outside, the air had turned crisp, and the trees lining the avenue were shedding their leaves in slow motion. They walked without a destination, just walking, and the conversation flowed easier now, lighter, punctuated by laughter. Isabella told him about growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, the daughter of a mechanic and a school teacher, about how she'd put herself through nursing school, working double shifts at a diner. About the first time she'd saved someone's life and how she'd cried in the supply closet afterward because she couldn't believe she'd actually done it. Gabriel told her about his love of buildings, not the business of real estate, which he carefully avoided mentioning, but the architecture itself, the way a structure could change a skyline, could become part of a city's identity. He told her about his childhood dream of being an architect, before practicality and family expectations steered him toward business. "Why didn't you?" Isabella asked. "Become an architect, I mean." Gabriel shrugged. "Life got in the way, or maybe I just took the easier path." "It's not too late," she said. He looked at her, surprised. I'm 42. So, you could have another 40 years. That's a whole second life. The simplicity of it, the sheer radical optimism, made something crack open inside him. They stopped at a small Italian café as the streetlights began to flicker on. Over espresso and biscotti, Gabriel found himself talking about things he hadn't said out loud in years, about loneliness, about the strange emptiness of success, about the fear that he'd built a life that looked perfect from the outside but felt hollow on the inside. And Isabella listened, really listened. Not with pity or judgment, but with the same careful attention she'd given the Matisse. "You know what I think?" she said, breaking a biscotti in half. "I think you're mourning something you never actually had. And that's harder than mourning something you lost." Gabriel stared at her. "How did you—" "Because I do it too," she said simply. "Every time I see a patient with family surrounding them, people who drop everything to be there, I mourn the version of my life where I have that kind of support, where I'm not doing everything alone." "You're not alone right now," Gabriel said quietly. Isabella's eyes met his, and for a moment the noise of the café faded away. There was only her and him, and the strange, terrifying possibility blooming between them. "No," she said softly. "I guess I'm not." They stayed until the café started closing, the owner giving them pointed looks as he wiped down tables. Outside, the night had turned cold, and Isabella shivered. Without thinking, Gabriel slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. "Gabrielle, you'll freeze." "I'm fine," he said. And he was. He felt more awake, more alive than he had in months. They stood on the corner, neither wanting to be the first to leave. A bus pulled up, and Isabella glanced at it, then back at him. "Yeah," but neither of them moved. "Can I see you again?" Gabriel asked, echoing his words from the café. Isabella smiled. "I was hoping you'd ask." "Saturday? Dinner? Okay." She started toward the bus, then turned back. "Gabriel? Yeah? Thank you for today, for listening. Thank you for trusting me enough to talk." The bus doors hissed open. Isabella climbed on, turning to wave at him through the window as it pulled away. Gabriel stood there, his jacket still warm from her body, watching until the taillights disappeared into the Baltimore night. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt something that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. He felt hope. Saturday came wrapped in the kind of autumn evening that made the city feel romantic. Cool air, amber streetlights, the scent of wood smoke drifting from somewhere unseen. Gabriel had made a reservation at a small Italian place in Little Italy, the kind with checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed money. He arrived early, as usual, and sat at the corner table he'd requested. His palms were sweating. Ridiculous, he thought. He'd negotiated million-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, but the prospect of dinner with Isabella had him nervous as a teenager. She walked in at 7:15, and Gabriel's breath caught. She wore a simple black dress that fell just above her knees, her hair down in soft waves around her shoulders. No jewelry, except small silver earrings. She looked beautiful, not in the polished, calculated way his ex-wife had perfected, but in a way that felt effortless, genuine. "Hi," she said, sliding into the seat across from him. Her cheeks were flushed from the walk, her eyes bright. "Hi yourself." Gabriel couldn't stop smiling. "You look incredible. This old thing?" She glanced down at her dress with a self-deprecating laugh. "I've had it since nursing school. It's literally my only nice dress." "It's perfect." They ordered wine, a Chianti the waiter recommended, and fell into easy conversation. But Gabriel noticed something different about Isabella tonight, a tension in her shoulders. A distraction in her eyes that hadn't been there at the museum. "Everything okay?" he asked gently. Isabella took a long sip of wine. "Yeah, just been a rough couple of days at work. Want to talk about it?" She hesitated, setting down her glass. "You sure? I don't want to bring the mood down." Isabella. Gabriel reached across the table, his hand palm up, an invitation. Talk to me. She placed her hand in his, and he felt the tremor in her fingers. Remember the 19-year-old I told you about? The motorcycle accident. Gabriel nodded. His mother came back to the hospital yesterday. She wanted to thank the staff, wanted to see the room where, Isabella's voice wavered, where he died, and she asked to speak to me specifically. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there while she hugged me and told me she knew we did everything we could. A tear slipped down her cheek. But we didn't, Gabriel. We didn't do enough because he still died, and she thanked me for it. Hey, Gabriel tightened his grip on her hand. You did everything humanly possible. You can't save everyone. I know that. Isabella wiped at her eyes, frustrated with herself. Logically, I know, but it doesn't make it easier. It doesn't stop me from replaying every second of that code, wondering if there was something I missed, some intervention I should have tried. Gabriel felt something crack open inside him, not pity, but a deep, aching empathy. Here was someone who cared so much it physically hurt her. Someone who carried the weight of other people's grief like it was her own. Can I tell you something? He said quietly. Isabella nodded, trying to compose herself. I've spent most of my adult life avoiding feeling anything real. I built walls so high, I convinced myself I was protecting something valuable, but I wasn't. I was just hiding. He paused, choosing his words carefully. And watching you, seeing how deeply you feel everything, even the painful stuff, it's humbling. You're not broken because it hurts, Isabella. You're human, and that's the most courageous thing I've ever seen. Isabella stared at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. How do you do that? Do what? Say exactly what I need to hear. Gabriel smiled softly. Maybe because I'm finally learning to say what I need to say. The waiter arrived with their food, pasta carbonara for her, osso buco for him, but neither of them touched it right away. They just sat there, hands clasped across the table, the restaurant buzzing around them like white noise. Tell me something about you, Isabella said, her voice steadier now. Something you don't usually share. Gabriel leaned back, considering. My marriage ended because I was never really in it, not emotionally. Veronica, my ex-wife, she accused me of being a ghost. Present, but not there. And she was right. Why? Because being there meant being vulnerable, and I didn't know how to do that. He looked down at their joined hands. I still don't, most of the time, but with you, it feels easier, like maybe I can learn. Isabella's expression softened. You're doing just fine. They ate slowly, savoring the food and the conversation. Gabriel told her about his divorce, the fights that turned into silent treatments, the way they'd stopped sleeping in the same bed months before the papers were filed, the relief and guilt he'd felt when it was finally over. Isabella shared more about her family, her father's quiet strength, her mother's unwavering faith, the younger brother who'd struggled with addiction and was now 2 years sober. She talked about the financial strain of nursing school, the loans she was still paying off, the way she sometimes ate ramen for dinner 3 nights in a row to make rent. Gabriel felt a pang of discomfort at that, knowing he could pay off her debt with a single check and not even notice. But he said nothing. Not yet. What made you want to become a nurse? He asked instead. Isabella's face changed, brightened. My grandmother. She had a heart attack when I was 12, and I watched the nurses in the ICU care for her with such dignity, such compassion. They didn't just keep her alive, they made her feel human, even hooked up to all those machines, and I remember thinking, that's what I want to do. I want to be the person who makes people feel less afraid. And your grandmother? She lived another 8 years, died peacefully in her sleep at 79. Isabella smiled. She used to tell me I was born to heal. I didn't believe her then. But now you do. Yeah. They ordered tiramisu to share, feeding each other bites across the table, laughing when Isabella got powdered sugar on her nose. Gabriel reached over to wipe it off, and their eyes locked. The laughter faded. "Gabriel," Isabella said softly, "I need to be honest with you about something." His heart kicked against his ribs. "Okay. I really like you, more than I probably should after just 2 dates. And that scares me." "Why does it scare you?" "Because I've watched people fall fast and crash hard. I've seen it destroy good people, and I can't afford to crash right now. My life it's barely held together as it is." Gabriel felt the weight of what she wasn't saying, that she was afraid he'd become another thing she couldn't sustain, another responsibility that would drain her dry. "I'm not asking you to hold it together," he said carefully. "I'm just asking for a chance to be part of your life, however that looks." "But what if we want different things? What if—" "Isabella." He waited until she looked at him. "What if we just take this one day at a time? No expectations, no pressure. Just us, figuring it out." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found must have reassured her, because she nodded slowly. "Okay, one day at a time." They left the restaurant hand in hand, walking through the quiet streets of Little Italy. The night had grown colder, and Isabella pressed closer to him. Gabriel slipped his arm around her shoulders, and she leaned into him, fitting perfectly against his side. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what? For listening, for not running when I got emotional, for—" She paused. "For being you." Gabriel stopped walking, turning to face her. They stood beneath a street lamp, her face tilted up toward his. He could see the freckles across her nose, the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, the slight tremor in her lips. "Can I kiss you?" he asked. Isabella's answer was to rise on her toes and press her mouth to his. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, exploring. Then deeper, more urgent, as if they were both trying to say with their bodies what words couldn't capture. Gabriel cupped her face in his hands, feeling her pulse beneath his thumbs, tasting wine and chocolate and something uniquely her. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Isabella rested her forehead against his. "Well," she whispered, "that was— yeah." They stood there for what felt like hours, wrapped in each other, the city moving around them. And Gabriel knew, with a certainty that terrified him, that this woman, this beautiful, complicated, courageous woman, was going to change his life. He just didn't know how much. The weeks that followed were a blur of stolen moments and late-night phone calls. Gabriel found himself checking his phone constantly, smiling at Isabella's texts like a lovesick fool. They saw each other whenever her schedule allowed, coffee before her shifts, walks along the inner harbour, one memorable afternoon spent wandering a used bookstore where Isabella insisted on reading him passages from her favourite novels. But tonight was different. Tonight, Gabriel wanted to do something special. He'd chosen Sotto Sopra, an intimate Italian restaurant tucked away in Baltimore's Mount Vernon neighbourhood. The kind of place with soft lighting, exposed brick walls, and a menu that didn't list prices. He'd been careful about the choice, upscale enough to feel special, but not so extravagant that it would make Isabella uncomfortable. Still, as he waited for her outside the restaurant, adjusting his tie for the 3rd time, he wondered if he'd miscalculated. A cab pulled up, and Isabella stepped out. Gabriel's breath caught. She wore the same black dress from their last dinner, but she'd added a thin silver necklace, simple, elegant. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, a few loose strands framing her face. She looked nervous and beautiful and completely out of her element. "Hey," she said, walking up to him. Her eyes darted to the restaurant's understated entrance, then back to him. "This is— wow. Too much?" Gabriel asked, suddenly worried. "No, I mean—" She laughed, a little breathlessly. "Maybe a little intimidating, but in a good way, I think." He offered his arm. Come on. If the food's terrible, we can sneak out and get pizza. That made her smile. Inside, the restaurant was everything Gabriel had hoped for, warm and intimate, with candlelight casting golden shadows across white tablecloths. A jazz trio played softly in the corner. The maître d' led them to a corner table, partially secluded by a wooden partition draped with ivy. Isabella slid into her seat, her eyes wide as she took in the surroundings. Gabriel, this place is nice? That's an understatement. She picked up the menu, then immediately set it down. There are no prices. Don't worry about that. That's easy for you to say. She bit her lip, a worry line creasing her forehead. I can't let you pay for everything all the time. It's not fair. Gabriel reached across the table, covering her hand with his. Isabella, tonight is my treat. Please. I want to do this. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, but next time we're going somewhere I can afford. Deal? Deal. The waiter appeared, an older man with a thick Italian accent, and recommended the evening's specials. Isabella listened intently, trying to pronounce the Italian words under her breath, and Gabriel found it endearing how seriously she took the whole thing. They ordered handmade gnocchi for her, braised short rib for him, and a bottle of Barolo the waiter promised was perfetto. As they waited for the food, Isabella relaxed into her chair, the tension in her shoulders easing. I have to admit, she said, this is really nice. I can't remember the last time I went somewhere like this. Never. She shook her head. Growing up, going out meant the diner or maybe Olive Garden on special occasions. And since nursing school, I've been too broke to do anything but survive. She paused, her expression turning thoughtful. It's strange, you know, being here, feeling like I'm playing dress-up in someone else's life. You're not playing anything, Gabriel said firmly. You belong here just as much as anyone else. Do I? Isabella's eyes met his, vulnerability flickering in them. Because I looked up this restaurant before coming. I know what it costs to eat here. And I know that a single meal could cover my groceries for 2 weeks. Gabriel felt a knot form in his stomach. He'd been so careful not to flaunt his wealth, but the gap between their worlds was showing anyway. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. You didn't. Isabella squeezed his hand. I'm just processing. Trying to figure out how this works, how we work. What do you mean? She chose her words carefully. You clearly have money, Gabriel. I'm not blind. The way you carry yourself, the places you choose, the fact that you never seem stressed about bills or work schedules. She paused. And I don't care about that. Really, I don't. But I need to know, what do you do? For work, I mean. You've been vague about it. Gabriel's heart began to race. This was the moment he'd been dreading, the moment when his carefully constructed anonymity would crumble. But before he could answer, the waiter returned with their wine, making a show of presenting the bottle and pouring with flourish. The interruption gave Gabriel a moment to think, to choose his words. I work in real estate, he said carefully, once the waiter had left. Development mostly, buildings, commercial properties. It wasn't a lie, just not the whole truth. Isabella nodded, accepting the answer. That makes sense. You light up when you talk about architecture. I do? You do? She smiled. It's one of my favorite things about you, the way your whole face changes when you see a building you admire, like a kid in a candy store. Gabriel felt relief wash over him, mixed with guilt. She'd given him an out, and he'd taken it. But the weight of the omission sat heavy in his chest. Their food arrived, works of art on white plates. Isabella's gnocchi were pillowy soft, drowning in sage butter. Gabriel's short rib fell apart at the touch of a fork. They ate slowly, savoring each bite, trading tastes across the table. Oh my God, Isabella moaned after trying the gnocchi. This is incredible. Good? Good doesn't even begin to cover it. She closed her eyes, savoring the taste. If I could eat like this every day, I'd weigh 300 pounds and die happy. Gabriel laughed. Noted. Though I'd still think you were beautiful. She blushed, looking down at her plate. You're going to make me unbearable with all these compliments. Impossible. You're too grounded for that. They talked through dinner, about everything and nothing. Isabella told him about a patient who'd woken up from a coma that week, squeezing her hand and asking for his wife. Gabriel shared a story about his father, a construction foreman who'd taught him to read blueprints before he could ride a bike. The conversation flowed like the wine, smooth, intoxicating, easy. And somewhere between the main course and dessert, Gabriel realized he was falling for her. Actually falling. Not the superficial attraction he'd mistaken for love in his marriage, but something deeper, more terrifying. When the waiter brought tiramisu on the house for the beautiful couple, Isabella's eyes widened. Does he think we're together? Gabriel finished. I hope so. She looked at him, her expression shifting. Are we? Together, I mean. Gabriel set down his fork. I'd like to be, if you would. I would, Isabella said softly. But Gabriel, I need you to know something. Okay. I don't have much to offer. No fancy dinners, no expensive gifts. My life is messy and exhausting and barely held together most days. If we do this, if we're really doing this, you need to know what you're signing up for. Gabriel reached across the table, taking both her hands in his. Isabella, I don't want fancy dinners. I don't want expensive gifts. I want you. Your messy, exhausting, barely held together life, all of it. Tears welled in her eyes. You say that now. I mean it now. And I'll mean it tomorrow. And the day after that. She wiped at her eyes, laughing through the tears. God, I'm crying in a nice restaurant. How mortifying. It's perfect, Gabriel said, and he meant it. They left the restaurant hand in hand, stepping out into the cool October night. The streets were quiet, lit by old-fashioned lampposts that cast pools of golden light on the sidewalk. Walk with me, Gabriel asked. Always. They wandered through Mount Vernon, past historic brownstones and wrought-iron fences. Isabella leaned into him, her head resting against his shoulder. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. At a small park, Gabriel stopped. He turned to face her, cupping her face in his hands. Thank you, he whispered. For what? For giving me a chance. For being you. For... He paused, searching for words. For making me feel alive again. Isabella rose on her toes and kissed him. Not tentatively this time, but with certainty, a promise, a commitment, a leap of faith. When they pulled apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. Take me home, she whispered. Gabriel's heart stuttered. Isabella. Not like that. She smiled, reading his thoughts. Not yet. Just stay with me tonight. Talk with me. Let me fall asleep knowing you're there. So he did. They took a cab to her small studio apartment in Fells Point, a fifth-floor walk-up with creaky stairs and a radiator that clanked. Isabella apologized for the mess, though there wasn't one. Just textbooks stacked on a tiny kitchen table, scrubs draped over a chair, a life lived in controlled chaos. They lay on her narrow bed, fully clothed, talking in whispers as the city hummed outside her window. Isabella told him about her dreams, specializing in cardiac care, maybe teaching someday, having enough money to not worry about every purchase. Gabriel told her about his regrets, his fears, the strange emptiness of having everything but feeling nothing. And somewhere around 2 a.m, Isabella fell asleep with her head on his chest, her breathing slow and even. Gabriel stayed awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of her trust pressed against him. And he knew, with absolute certainty, that he could never let her go. The next 6 weeks passed in a haze of happiness Gabriel hadn't known existed. He and Isabella fell into a rhythm. Dinners after her shifts, weekend mornings at the farmer's market, stolen kisses in hospital parking lots when he picked her up from work. They learned each other's rhythms, habits, the small intimacies that built a life together. Gabriel learned that Isabella sang off-key in the shower, that she was terrified of spiders but fearless with dying patients, that she took her coffee black but loved sweet tea like she'd never left Pennsylvania. Isabella learned that Gabriel was an early riser who read the news with his first cup of coffee, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a childhood fall, that he could quote entire passages from architecture books but couldn't remember where he'd left his keys. They were careful with each other, Gabriel because he was still hiding the full scope of his wealth, Isabella because she was afraid of needing him too much. But the careful distance was shrinking. Every shared moment pulled them closer. One Saturday evening in late November, Isabella invited him to her apartment for dinner. Nothing fancy, she'd warned over the phone, just me, some pasta, and whatever's on sale at the grocery store. Gabriel arrived at 7 with a bottle of wine and flowers, daisies, because Isabella had mentioned once that roses felt too formal. She opened the door wearing jeans and an oversized sweater, her hair in a messy bun, barefoot. She looked perfect. Come in," she said, ushering him inside. The apartment smelled like garlic and tomatoes, warmth radiating from the tiny kitchen. "I'm making my mum's marinara. Fair warning, it's nothing like that fancy restaurant." "I'm sure it'll be better," Gabriel said honestly. Isabella had set the small table by the window, with mismatched plates and a candle stuck in an old wine bottle. The radiator clanked its familiar song. Through the window, Baltimore twinkled in the early winter darkness. They ate on the couch because the table was too small for 2 people to sit comfortably. The pasta was simple but delicious, al dente spaghetti tossed with homemade marinara and fresh basil. They drank the wine from coffee mugs because Isabella only had 2 wine glasses and one had cracked. "This is perfect," Gabriel said, and he meant it. More perfect than any Michelin-starred meal. "Liar." Isabella laughed, nudging him with her shoulder. "But I appreciate it." After dinner, they washed dishes side by side in the cramped kitchen, Isabella washing while Gabriel dried. It was domestic and ordinary, and Gabriel had never felt more content. "Can I ask you something?" Isabella said, her hands submerged in soapy water. "Anything. Do you ever think about the future, like our future?" Gabriel set down the dish he was drying. "All the time. What do you see?" He considered his answer carefully. "I see more nights like this. I see you finishing your certification. I see us building something real." Isabella was quiet for a moment. "I see that too, but sometimes I wonder if we're moving too fast. If we really know each other." "What don't you know about me?" Gabriel asked, his heart beginning to race. She turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "I don't know where you live. You've never invited me over. I don't know your friends, your family. I know you work in real estate, but I don't know what that actually means for you day to day." She paused. "It feels like there's this whole part of your life that's separate from me." Gabriel felt the weight of his omission pressing down on him. She was right. He'd been keeping her at arm's length from his real world, the penthouse, the business, the wealth that defined him in ways he both embraced and resented. "You're right," he said quietly. "I have been holding back." "Why?" He moved to the couch, needing space to think. Isabella followed, sitting beside him, her knee touching his. "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that if you knew everything about me, about my life, my money, my world, it would change things between us." Isabella frowned. "What do you mean, your money?" This was it, the moment of truth. Gabriel took a deep breath. "I told you I work in real estate development, that's true. But I didn't tell you that I own the company, Mercer Development Group. We're one of the largest commercial developers on the East Coast." Isabella stared at him, processing. "How large?" "Very large." "Like How many buildings? 43 properties across 12 cities, including the Harborview Towers here in Baltimore. Isabella's eyes widened. The glass buildings by the water, those are yours? Yes. She stood up, pacing the small space. Gabriel watched her, his heart pounding. So when you said you work in real estate, she laughed, but there was no humor in it. You weren't just underselling it. You were hiding it. I wasn't hiding. What do you call it then? She turned to face him, her expression a mixture of hurt and confusion. 6 weeks, Gabriel. 6 weeks of me worrying about splitting checks, of feeling self-conscious about my tiny apartment and my second-hand clothes. And the whole time you're, what? A millionaire? Isabella. How much? She interrupted. How much are you worth? Gabriel hesitated. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. Because I've been sitting here feeling like we're in this together, two people trying to make it work despite the odds. But we're not, are we? You're not struggling. You're not worried about bills or student loans or whether you can afford dinner. You've been slumming it with me. That's not fair, Gabriel said, standing. I never looked at it that way, not once. Then why didn't you tell me? Her voice cracked. Why let me think we were on equal footing when we're not even in the same world? Because I liked being Gabriel to you, not Gabriel Mercer, CEO, not the guy who gets invited to things because of his bank account, just me, a man who met a woman in a coffee shop and fell for her. Isabella's eyes shimmered with tears. But that's not all you are, and by hiding it you made a choice not to trust me with the truth. I was going to tell you, Gabriel said desperately. Tonight, actually. That's why I came here. I wanted to be honest, to bring you into my life fully. Convenient timing. She wiped at her eyes, angry at herself for crying. Right after I asked why you've been keeping me at a distance. Gabriel felt his world tilting. Isabella, please. I know I screwed up. I should have told you sooner, but my feelings for you, those were always real. That was never a lie. She looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. I need you to leave. What? I need time to think, to process this. I can't do that with you here. Isabella, please, Gabriel. Her voice was barely a whisper. Just go. He wanted to argue, to fight for her, to make her understand. But he saw the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of the revelation crushing her, and he knew she needed space. Okay, he said quietly. But this isn't over. We're not over. Not if I have anything to say about it. Isabella said nothing. Gabriel grabbed his jacket and walked to the door. He paused, hand on the knob, and turned back. I love you, Isabella. That's the truth. And everything I feel for you has nothing to do with money or status or any of that. It's just you. It's always been you. He left before she could respond, his words hanging in the air like a prayer. Isabella stood in the middle of her tiny apartment, surrounded by the remains of their dinner, and let herself cry. Not because Gabriel was wealthy, not because he'd kept it from her, but because for 6 weeks she'd allowed herself to believe in something simple and real, and now she didn't know what was true anymore. Outside, Gabriel sat in his car for 20 minutes before starting the engine. His phone buzzed with emails and messages, his assistant asking about Monday's meetings, his accountant with quarterly reports, his world continuing on as if his heart hadn't just been ripped open. He drove through the Baltimore streets, past the Harborview Towers with their 1,000 windows glowing against the night sky. His buildings, his empire, the life he'd built. And for the first time in his career, he would have traded all of it, every property, every dollar, every bit of success, for 1 more hour in that cramped apartment with the woman he loved. The silence was unbearable. 3 days passed without a word from Isabella. Gabriel checked his phone obsessively, every notification sending a spike of hope through his chest, every disappointment landing like a stone. He typed and deleted a dozen messages, called twice and hung up before it could ring. He didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. Work became his refuge and his prison. He sat through meetings without hearing a word, signed contracts without reading them, stared at architectural plans until the lines blurred together. His assistant, Monica, asked twice if he was feeling well. He lied and said he was fine. He wasn't fine. On the fourth day, he drove past Isabella's apartment building. Her lights were off. He didn't stop. On the fifth day, he found himself back at the Harbour Brew Café, sitting at the same table where they'd met. The barista, a young woman with purple hair, remembered him. "Where's your friend?" she asked. "The nurse with all the books?" Gabriel couldn't answer. A week became 10 days. 10 days became 2 weeks. Gabriel threw himself into a new project, a mixed-use development in Philadelphia that required constant attention. He took meetings in New York, flew to Boston for site inspections, worked 16-hour days until exhaustion forced him into dreamless sleep. But every quiet moment brought her back. The smell of coffee, the sound of rain, a woman laughing on the street who didn't sound anything like Isabella but made his chest ache anyway. Richard Hale, his business partner, cornered him after a board meeting. "What's going on with you?" "Nothing." "Bullshit. You've been a ghost for 2 weeks. You're distracted, you're not sleeping, and you nearly agreed to terms that would have cost us $3 million if I hadn't caught it." Richard leaned against the conference table, arms crossed. "Talk to me." Gabriel loosened his tie, suddenly feeling suffocated. "I met someone. And I ruined it." Richard raised an eyebrow. "How badly?" "I didn't tell her who I was, what I'm worth. She found out and felt betrayed." "Did you lie?" "I omitted." "Gabriel," Richard sighed, "that's the same thing to someone who values honesty." "I know." Gabriel ran a hand through his hair. "I know that now. So fix it." "How? She won't return my calls, won't answer my texts. I don't even know if she wants to hear from me." "Then you give her space," Richard said simply, "and you hope she comes back." Gabriel wanted to argue, to push back, but he knew Richard was right. Pushing Isabella now would only drive her further away. So he waited. Isabella threw herself into work with a ferocity that scared even her. She picked up extra shifts, volunteered for the hardest cases, stayed late to help other nurses with their charting. Anything to avoid going home to her empty apartment where Gabriel's absence felt like a physical presence. She'd listened to his voicemail once, the one where he said he loved her, and then deleted it before she could hear it again. She'd started typing responses to his texts 100 times, but nothing felt right. What was she supposed to say? "I'm not mad that you're rich. I'm mad that you didn't trust me." It sounded petty even in her head, but it wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about the fact that for 6 weeks she'd been completely herself with him, vulnerable, honest, open, while he'd been holding back. It felt like an imbalance she couldn't reconcile. "You look like hell," said Dr. Chen, the attending physician, one night during a rare moment of quiet in the ICU. Isabella glanced up from the chart she was updating. "Thanks. When's the last time you ate something that wasn't from a vending machine?" She couldn't remember. Dr. Chen pulled up a chair, sitting beside her at the nurse's station. "Want to talk about it?" "Not really." "Relationship?" Isabella's silence was answer enough. "For what it's worth," Dr. Chen said, "being angry is easier than being hurt. But it won't heal anything." Isabella set down her pen. "What if I don't know how to forgive him?" "Start by figuring out if you want to." That night, Isabella lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Dr. Chen's words echoing in her mind. Did she want to forgive Gabriel? Did she want to let him back in? The answer scared her. Yes, but wanting something and knowing how to get there were two different things. She thought about the 6 weeks they'd spent together. The way he'd listened when she talked about her day, the way he'd held her when she cried about losing patience, the way he'd looked at her like she was the only person in the world who mattered. Had that been real? Or had it been a performance from a man who could afford to play at being normal? She picked up her phone, scrolling through old text messages. Stupid stuff mostly. Gabriel sending her photos of interesting buildings. Her sending him memes from the nurse's break room. Conversations about nothing that somehow meant everything. Her thumb hovered over his name. She could call right now. End this silence that was eating both of them alive. But fear held her back. Fear that if she let him in again, she'd lose herself completely. Fear that his world would swallow her whole. Fear that she wasn't strong enough to love someone whose life was so fundamentally different from hers. She set the phone down and closed her eyes. 3 weeks after the revelation, Gabriel found himself at a charity gala he couldn't avoid. The kind of event he usually tolerated. Wealthy people writing checks to feel good about themselves while drinking champagne and making connections. Tonight, it felt grotesque. He stood by the bar, nursing a scotch he didn't want, while around him, Baltimore's elite mingled and laughed. Melissa Hale, Richard's wife, approached with a predatory smile. "Gabriel, darling, where's your mystery woman? Richard mentioned you'd been seeing someone." "She couldn't make it," he said flatly. "Pity. I was curious to meet her." Melissa sipped her martini. "You know, Veronica was asking about you the other day." Gabriel's jaw tightened. "I'm not interested in discussing my ex-wife." "Touchy." Melissa laughed. "I'm just saying, if this new thing doesn't work out," Veronica seemed open to reconnecting. "It's going to work out," Gabriel said, more to himself than to her. "Such confidence. That's what I always liked about you." Melissa patted his arm and drifted away. Gabriel left the gala early, driving aimlessly through the city until he found himself parked outside St. Joseph Regional Medical Center, Isabella's hospital. He didn't know if she was working tonight, but being close to where she spent her days made him feel less alone. He sat there for an hour, watching nurses and doctors come and go through the emergency entrance. None of them were Isabella. Finally, he drove home to his empty penthouse with its floor-to-ceiling windows and million-dollar view. He stood in the darkness, looking out over the city he'd helped build, and felt nothing but the hollowness she'd left behind. On the 23rd day, Isabella was counting, though she wouldn't admit it. She was leaving the hospital after a brutal 12-hour shift when she saw him. Gabriel sat on a bench across from the employee entrance, hands in his coat pockets, looking as exhausted as she felt. Their eyes met across the parking lot. Neither moved. Isabella's heart hammered in her chest. She could walk away, pretend she hadn't seen him, go home and continue this painful limbo they'd created, or she could walk toward him. She thought about all the patients she'd seen in the ICU, the ones who waited too long to say what mattered, the ones who ran out of time for second chances. Life was too short for this. Isabella started walking, not away, toward. Gabriel stood slowly, hope and fear warring on his face. She stopped a few feet away from him, close enough to see the circles under his eyes, the weight he'd lost, the pain that mirrored her own. "Hi," she said quietly. "Hi." His voice was rough, like he hadn't used it in days. "You look terrible." "So do you." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "We should probably talk." "Yeah." Gabriel exhaled, relief flooding through him. "We really should." "There's a coffee shop, Harbor Brew," Gabriel offered. Isabella nodded. "Where it all started." "Where it all started," he echoed. They stood there for another moment, the distance between them feeling simultaneously infinite and non-existent. And then Isabella took the first step toward closing it. The Harbor Brew Café looked exactly the same. Same fogged windows, same hiss of the espresso machine, same smell of roasted beans and cinnamon, but everything felt different now. Gabriel and Isabella sat at the same table where they'd first met, though neither acknowledged it. The silence between them was heavy, loaded with 3 weeks of unspoken words. Gabriel's coffee sat untouched. Isabella wrapped her hands around her cup, seeking warmth she couldn't seem to find. "I don't know where to start," Gabriel finally said. "The beginning, maybe." Isabella looked up at him. "The real beginning, no omissions this time." Gabriel nodded, accepting the challenge. "My full name is Gabriel Thomas Mercer. I'm 42. I founded Mercer Development Group 12 years ago with a loan from my father and a business plan I wrote on napkins. We started with one strip mall in Delaware. Now we own 43 properties worth approximately $800 million. I have a penthouse in Harbor East that costs more than most people make in a lifetime. I drive a car that could pay off your student loans twice over. And until I met you, none of it meant anything." Isabella absorbed this, her expression unreadable. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because every relationship I've ever had has been tainted by money. Women who wanted access, friends who wanted favors, even my marriage. Veronica loved what I could provide more than she ever loved me." He leaned forward. "And then I met you, and you looked at me like I was just a person, not a bank account, not a connection, just Gabriel. And I was terrified that if you knew the truth, that would change. So you lied." "I omitted," Gabriel corrected, then stopped himself. "No, you're right. I lied by not telling you, and I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry, Isabella." She was quiet for a long moment, staring into her coffee. "Do you know what the worst part was? Tell me." "I sat in my apartment after you left, and I realized I didn't know which parts of us were real. Was the man who held me while I cried real? Or was that just you playing a role? Were you genuinely interested in my life, or were you just curious how the other half lives? Isabella, let me finish." Her voice was steady but pained. "I kept replaying every moment, every conversation, looking for signs I'd missed. And I found them everywhere. The way you never worried about money. The confidence in how you moved through the world. The fact that you always had time for me, like work was optional." She looked up at him, tears threatening. "And I felt like an idiot. Like I'd been so desperate for connection that I'd ignored what was right in front of me." Gabriel's heart broke at the raw honesty in her words. "You weren't an idiot, and everything between us was real. Every conversation, every moment, that was me. The real me, not the CEO, not the developer. Just a man who fell in love with an extraordinary woman. You said that before, that you love me. I do, more than I knew I was capable of loving anyone." Isabella wiped at her eyes. "I listened to your voicemail, the one where you said it. I must have played it 50 times before I deleted it." "Why did you delete it?" "Because it hurt too much to hear." She took a shaky breath. "Because I love you too, Gabriel, and that terrifies me." The words hung in the air between them, simultaneously a gift and a weight. "Then why are we sitting here breaking each other's hearts?" Gabriel asked softly. "Because love isn't enough," Isabella said. "Not by itself. We come from different worlds. You throw money around like it's nothing, and I'm not judging, that's your reality. But my reality is checking my bank account before buying groceries, picking up extra shifts to make rent, eating ramen because it's cheap and filling." She paused. "How do we bridge that gap without one of us losing ourselves?" Gabriel considered this carefully. "What if we don't try to bridge it? What if we just exist in both worlds, together? What does that mean? It means I don't want to change you. I don't want you to become someone who's comfortable with penthouses and galas and all the bullshit that comes with my life. And you don't have to. But I want to be part of your world too. The hospital, the late-night study sessions, the tiny apartment with the clanking radiator. I want all of it." Isabella shook her head. "You say that now, but I mean it." Gabriel reached across the table, taking her hand. "Isabella, I've spent 12 years building an empire I don't care about. Buildings that will stand long after I'm gone, monuments to success that feel empty. And then I met you, and for the first time, I understood what actually matters. Not things, not status, but connection, purpose, love. Gabriel, I'm not asking you to marry me, not yet. I'm asking for a chance, a real chance, to do this right. No secrets, no omissions. I'll introduce you to my world if you want, or we can keep it separate. Whatever you need. But please don't walk away because of money. Don't let that be what breaks us. Isabella stared at their joined hands. I have conditions. Anything. Honesty, complete brutal honesty. If I ask you something, you tell me the truth, even if you think it'll hurt me. Done. I need time, real time to adjust to this, to figure out how I fit into your life and how you fit into mine. No rushing, no pressure. However long you need. And I meet your world, the real one. Your business partners, your friends, all of it. No more keeping me separate like I'm something you're ashamed of. I was never ashamed, Gabriel said firmly. I was protecting what we had. But you're right. No more separation. Isabella pulled her hand back, wrapping it around her coffee cup again. I'm scared, Gabriel. So am I. What if we try this and it doesn't work? What if the differences are too big? Then at least we tried. Gabriel's eyes held hers. But I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to figure it out. Together. Isabella was quiet for a long time, watching the rain streak down the window. Gabriel waited, barely breathing, while she worked through whatever internal calculation she was making. Finally, she looked back at him. Okay, let's try. For real this time. No holding back, no protecting each other from the truth. Just us. Messy and complicated and probably a little bit crazy. The relief that flooded through Gabriel was so intense, it was almost painful. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. I'm going to be difficult about this. I'm going to question everything and push back when your world feels too big or too much. I'm going to need reassurance and space in equal measure. I can handle difficult. A small smile tugged at Isabella's lips. We'll see. They sat there for another hour, talking through logistics and fears and hopes. Gabriel told her about his penthouse, his business, the parts of his life he'd kept hidden. Isabella told him about her insecurities, her fear of being swallowed by his wealth, her determination to maintain her independence. It wasn't easy conversation. There were moments of tension, of misunderstanding, of old hurts resurfacing. But they worked through it piece by piece, building something stronger than what they'd had before. When they finally left the café, the rain had stopped. The streets were slick and reflective, the city lights dancing on wet pavement. They walked slowly, shoulder to shoulder, not quite touching. Can I take you home? Gabriel asked. To my apartment. Wherever you want. Isabella considered this. Actually, I want to see it. Your penthouse. Your real life. Gabriel stopped walking. Are you sure? No, but I need to see it. Need to understand what I'm signing up for. Okay. Gabriel hailed a cab, giving the driver his address. They rode in silence, Isabella's hand finding his in the darkness of the back seat. The building was everything she'd imagined and more. Sleek, modern, intimidating. The doorman greeted Gabriel by name. The elevator required a keycard for the penthouse floor. Isabella's stomach churned with each floor they ascended. The doors opened directly into Gabriel's home. Isabella stepped out and froze. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor. The space was massive, open concept with soaring ceilings, designer furniture, art on the walls that probably cost more than her car. Everything was perfect, curated, expensive. This is where you live, she said quietly. Yes. She walked to the windows, looking out over the city. Somewhere down there was her tiny apartment with its clanking radiator and mismatched dishes. The contrast was staggering. Isabella. Gabriel came up behind her, close but not touching. Talk to me. It's just real now. Before I could pretend the money was abstract. But this, she gestured at the space, this is your everyday. This is normal to you. It's just a place. No, Gabriel, it's not. She turned to face him. This is your baseline. This is what you're used to. And my apartment could fit in your living room 3 times over. I don't care about that. But I do. Isabella's voice cracked. Because this terrifies me. Not because it's beautiful or expensive, but because it represents a life I don't know how to navigate. And I'm scared of losing myself trying to learn. The Gabriel cupped her face in his hands. Then don't learn. Don't change. Stay exactly who you are, and I'll meet you where you are. This penthouse, it's just where I sleep. It's not who I am. You've seen who I am. In the café, in your apartment, in every moment we've shared. That's me. This is just stuff. Isabella searched his eyes, looking for doubt, for hesitation. She found none. I need you to promise me something, she whispered. Anything. Promise me that if I start changing, if I start becoming someone I'm not to fit into your world, you'll tell me. You'll call me on it. I promise. Gabriel kissed her forehead. But I don't think that's going to happen. How can you be so sure? Because you're the strongest person I've ever met, and strength like yours doesn't get swallowed by penthouses and money. It just is. Isabella leaned into him, letting herself be held, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. They stood there in the darkness, the city glittering below them, 2 people from different worlds, trying to build something that belonged to neither and both. And for the first time in 3 weeks, the ache in Isabella's chest began to ease. Stay, Gabriel whispered. Not for anything physical. Just stay. Let me hold you. Let me prove that this, us, is more than where we come from. Isabella pulled back just enough to look at him. Okay. They moved to the couch, and Gabriel wrapped her in a soft blanket. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe, the distance between them finally starting to close. The invitation arrived 3 days later, thick cardstock with embossed lettering. Richard and Melissa Hale request the pleasure of your company for dinner at their home. Gabriel held it up for Isabella to see during one of their morning coffee dates, which had become their ritual again. It's time, he said simply. Isabella set down her cup, her stomach immediately knotting. Your business partner. And his wife, they've been asking to meet you. Gabriel reached across the table. You don't have to do this if you're not ready. No. Isabella squared her shoulders. I said I wanted to see your world. This is part of it. But as the date approached, her anxiety grew. She stood in front of her closet the night before, staring at her limited options. The black dress she'd worn to their dinners suddenly felt shabby, outdated. Everything else was worse. Work clothes, casual jeans, nothing appropriate for dinner at what Gabriel had carefully described as a nice home in Roland Park. She'd Googled Roland Park. The houses started at $2 million. I have nothing to wear, she told Gabriel over the phone that night, hating how small her voice sounded. Wear anything. You'll be beautiful. Gabriel, I'm serious. I looked up the neighborhood. These people have money, real money, and I'm going to show up looking like yourself, Gabriel interrupted gently. Isabella, they're not expecting you to look like you walked out of Vogue. Just be you. But being herself felt like the scariest option. The next evening, Gabriel picked her up in his car, a sleek black Mercedes she'd only seen once before. He'd dressed down, relatively speaking, slacks and a button-down, no tie. Still, he looked polished in a way Isabella knew she couldn't match. She'd settled on the black dress, added the silver necklace he'd complimented before, and spent an hour on makeup that she hoped looked effortless. Her hands shook as she locked her apartment door. You look incredible, Gabriel said when he saw her. You're contractually obligated to say that. There's no contract. He kissed her cheek. Just truth. The drive to Roland Park took 20 minutes. The neighborhood was exactly what Isabella had feared. Massive homes set back from tree-lined streets, manicured lawns, the kind of old-money elegance that whispered rather than shouted. Gabriel pulled into a circular driveway in front of a brick colonial that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Isabella's breath caught. "This is a nice home." "I may have undersold it," Gabriel admitted. "You think?" He came around to open her door, offering his hand. "Remember, you're doing me a favor being here, not the other way around." They walked to the front door together. Gabriel squeezed her hand once before ringing the bell. The door opened to reveal a woman in her early 50s, blonde, impeccably dressed in cream slacks and a silk blouse, with the kind of effortless elegance that came from a lifetime of privilege. Her smile was warm, but assessing. "Gabriel, darling." She air-kissed both his cheeks. "And you must be Isabella." "I am." "Thank you for inviting me, Mrs. Hale. Please, call me Melissa. Come in, come in." The interior was stunning. High ceilings, crystal chandelier, oil paintings that looked original. Isabella felt like she was walking through a museum. Her footsteps echoed on marble floors. Richard Hale appeared from what looked like a library, tall, silver-haired, with sharp eyes that took in everything. He shook Gabriel's hand firmly, then turned to Isabella. "So you're the woman who's been keeping Gabriel distracted from quarterly earnings," he said with a slight smile. "I hope not too distracted," Isabella managed. "On the contrary, he's been useless." Richard's smile widened. "Which means you must be something special. Drink." They moved to a sitting room that overlooked a garden lit by subtle landscape lighting. A woman in a black uniform appeared with a tray of cocktails. Isabella accepted a glass of white wine, grateful to have something to do with her hands. Two other couples were already there, Marcus and Jennifer Stone, who owned a chain of luxury hotels, and David and Pamela Chen, prominent doctors at Johns Hopkins. Everyone was friendly, welcoming even, but Isabella felt the gulf between them like a physical thing. The conversation flowed around her. Talk of recent trips to Europe, investment properties, mutual acquaintances she'd never heard of. She sipped her wine and smiled and tried not to feel like an anthropologist studying an alien culture. "Isabella, Gabriel tells us you're a nurse," Melissa said, her tone bright, with what might have been genuine interest or polite condescension. Isabella couldn't tell. "Yes, ICU at St. Joseph." "How noble," Pamela Chen said. She was a cardiologist, Isabella had learned. "I always admired ICU nurses. Such difficult work." "It has its moments," Isabella said carefully. "I imagine the pay isn't great, though," Marcus Stone added. "I looked into healthcare investments last year. The profit margins are terrible, especially for nursing staff." An awkward silence fell. Gabriel's hand found Isabella's knee under the table, a silent gesture of support. "The pay isn't why most people become nurses," Isabella said evenly. "We do it because we believe healthcare is a right, not a commodity." Melissa laughed, a tinkling sound that set Isabella's teeth on edge. "How refreshingly idealistic. Gabriel, where did you find her?" "A coffee shop," Gabriel said, his voice carrying an edge Isabella hadn't heard before, "where she was studying for her cardiac care certification while working 12-hour shifts, while I was sitting alone feeling sorry for myself." The comment shifted something in the room. Richard raised his glass slightly in acknowledgement. "Ambitious and principled," he said to Isabella. No wonder Gabriel's smitten. Dinner was announced, and they moved to a dining room with a table that could seat 12. Isabella found herself between Gabriel and David Chen, grateful for the buffer. The meal was elaborate, 5 courses, each more intricate than the last. Isabella watched which fork the others used and followed suit. "So how did you two actually meet?" Jennifer Stone asked over the second course. "Coffee shop romance sounds almost too perfect." Gabriel looked at Isabella, letting her tell it. It was raining, Isabella said. The café was packed, and the only empty seat was at Gabriel's table. I asked if I could sit down. We started talking and didn't stop. For 2 hours, Gabriel added. I was supposed to be reviewing contracts. Didn't look at a single one. And you didn't know who he was? Melissa asked, her perfectly shaped eyebrow arching slightly. I knew he was Gabriel. That was enough. But when you found out... Melissa, Richard interrupted smoothly. Perhaps we should focus on the present rather than the past. Melissa smiled, but there was steel behind it. Of course. I'm just curious how one navigates such a significant difference in lifestyle. Isabella felt anger flare, but kept her voice level. The same way anyone navigates a relationship, with honesty, communication, and mutual respect. But surely the filet is excellent, Melissa, Gabriel said, his tone brooking no argument. You'll have to share your caterer's information. The conversation shifted mercifully to food, then to upcoming holiday plans. Isabella breathed easier, though she could feel Melissa's eyes on her throughout the meal. After dinner, the women retreated to a sitting room, apparently still a custom in certain circles, while the men retired to Richard's study. Isabella found herself cornered by Melissa and Jennifer, both holding delicate teacups. You're very pretty, Melissa said, studying Isabella like a specimen. Gabriel's ex-wife was pretty too, though in a different way, more polished. Melissa, Jennifer said with a warning tone. What? I'm just making conversation. Melissa sipped her tea. Isabella, do you have family money? Melissa, it's fine, Isabella said, though her heart was pounding. No, I don't. My father's a mechanic. My mother teaches elementary school. I put myself through nursing school working at a diner. How admirable, Melissa said in a tone that suggested it was anything but. And you're not concerned that Gabriel might be, shall we say, a significant upgrade in lifestyle? Are you asking if I'm a gold digger? Isabella asked bluntly. The room went silent. I'm asking, Melissa said carefully, if you understand the responsibilities that come with being attached to someone of Gabriel's status, the expectations, the scrutiny, the social obligations. Isabella set down her teacup. Mrs. Hale, I appreciate your concern for Gabriel, truly, but my relationship with him is exactly that, my relationship. I'm not looking to upgrade my lifestyle or access his bank account. I'm looking to build something real with someone I love. If that doesn't fit your definition of appropriate, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to apologize for who I am or where I come from. Melissa stared at her, surprise flickering across her perfect features. Then, unexpectedly, she smiled, a real one this time. Good, she said simply. Gabriel needs someone with a spine. Veronica never could stand up to anyone. Jennifer laughed, breaking the tension. Welcome to the lioness den, Isabella. You just passed the test. In the study, Richard poured scotch for the men, his expression thoughtful. She's not what I expected. What did you expect? Gabriel asked, accepting the glass. Someone more pliable. Someone dazzled by the money. Richard swirled his drink. But she's got steel in her. I like that. She's terrified, Gabriel admitted, but she's here anyway, that's courage. She's good for you, Richard said. I haven't seen you this alive in years. Don't screw it up. I'm trying not to. When they rejoined the women, Isabella was laughing at something Jennifer had said, her posture more relaxed than when Gabriel had left. Melissa caught his eye and gave him an almost imperceptible nod of approval. They left an hour later, Isabella collapsing into the car seat with an exhausted sigh. That was horrible, Gabriel finished. I'm so sorry. Melissa can be protective, Isabella said. She was testing me, making sure I'm not after your money. She had no right. Gabriel, Isabella turned to face him. She was looking out for you. I get it. And honestly, if our positions were reversed, if some wealthy person started dating you, I'd probably do the same thing. Gabriel pulled out of the driveway, shaking his head. "You handled it better than I would have. I grew up with 5 brothers. I learned early how to hold my ground." She paused. "Did I pass?" "With flying colors. Richard said you have steel in you. Is that good?" "It's perfect." Gabriel reached over, taking her hand. "You were incredible tonight. I know that wasn't easy." "It really wasn't." Isabella laughed shakily. "But I survived, and now I know what I'm dealing with." "That's not always my world," Gabriel said. "Richard and Melissa are intense. Most of my life is quieter than that." "I hope so. I don't think I can handle that every week." They drove in comfortable silence, the tension of the evening slowly draining away. When Gabriel pulled up outside Isabella's apartment, she didn't immediately move to get out. "Thank you for tonight," she said softly, "for having my back in there. Always. I mean it, Gabriel. When Melissa started in on me, you shut it down. You didn't let her make me feel small. Nobody gets to make you feel small, not on my watch." Isabella leaned across the console and kissed him, deep, grateful, full of promise. When they pulled apart, both breathless, she smiled. "Want to come up? I have leftover pizza and a radiator that clanks. Much better than a 5-course meal." Gabriel laughed. "Best offer I've had all night." They climbed the 5 flights to her apartment, and Isabella felt the weight of the evening lift with each step. This was her world, simple, real, comfortable, and Gabriel fit into it perfectly. As they sat on her worn couch eating cold pizza straight from the box, Gabriel realized something profound. He'd been terrified of bringing Isabella into his world because he thought it would change her. But watching her tonight, strong, authentic, unapologetically herself, he understood that she would never be changed by his money or his status. She would only ever be Isabella, and that was more than enough. 2 weeks after the dinner at the Hales, Isabella and Gabriel had fallen into a new rhythm. The tension from his revelation had eased into something deeper, more solid. They'd had the difficult conversations, weathered the doubts, and come out stronger on the other side. Gabriel had been patient, almost maddeningly so. They'd kissed, held each other through long nights, but always stopped before crossing that final line. Not because Isabella didn't want to. She did. Desperately. But there was something about taking that step that felt enormous, irreversible. Like once they went there would be no going back. "Stay with me tonight," Gabriel said one Friday evening as they walked along the harbour. "At the penthouse. Really stay." Isabella's heart kicked against her ribs. "Gabriel, I'm not pressuring you," he said quickly. "We don't have to do anything you're not ready for. I just want to wake up with you. Want to make you breakfast and show you the sunrise from the windows. That's all." But they both knew it wasn't all. The air between them had been charged for weeks, every touch lingering a little longer, every kiss deepening until they were both breathless and aching. "Okay," Isabella heard herself say. "Yes." Gabriel's expression shifted, surprise, joy, desire, all flickering across his face in rapid succession. "Yeah? Yeah." She smiled, nervous but certain. "Let's do this." They took a cab to his building, Isabella's overnight bag clutched in her lap. Her hands were shaking slightly. Gabriel noticed and covered them with his own. "We can still just sleep," he said softly. "I meant what I said." "I know, but I don't want to just sleep." Isabella met his eyes. "I want you, Gabriel. All of you. I'm just nervous. So am I." "You are?" "Terrified." He laughed shakily. "You have no idea how much I want to get this right, how much you mean to me." The vulnerability in his voice steadied her. They were in this together, both scared, both wanting, both willing to be brave. The penthouse was dark when they arrived, the city lights providing the only illumination. Gabriel didn't turn on the lamps, and Isabella was grateful. The darkness made everything feel softer, more intimate. "Wine?" Gabriel offered. "No." Isabella set down her bag. I want to be present for this. Completely present. Gabriel nodded, understanding. They stood in the living room, suddenly awkward despite all the time they'd spent together. How did people do this? Navigate the space between clothed and vulnerable, between conversation and surrender? Isabella made the first move. She stepped close to Gabriel, reaching up to cup his face. Hi. Hi yourself. He smiled, some of the tension easing. She kissed him slowly, thoroughly, pouring weeks of want into it. Gabriel responded in kind, his hands finding her waist, pulling her closer. The kiss deepened, grew more urgent. Isabella felt the world narrow to just this, his mouth on hers, his hands on her body, the thundering of her own heartbeat. They moved toward the bedroom, a tangle of reaching hands and shed clothing. Gabriel paused at the doorway. Are you sure? I'm sure. Isabella's voice was steady, despite the riot of nerves in her stomach. I want this. I want you. The bedroom was all windows and skyline, the city spread out beneath them like a million fireflies. Gabriel laid her down on soft sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent, but Isabella didn't care about that now. She only cared about the way he looked at her, like she was precious, miraculous, his. You're beautiful, he whispered, tracing the curve of her shoulder, the line of her collarbone. So damn beautiful. Isabella pulled him down to her, tired of words, needing action. They came together with a mixture of urgency and tenderness, learning each other's bodies, discovering what made the other gasp, tremble, surrender completely. It was intense. More intense than Isabella had expected. Gabriel was attentive, careful, asking wordlessly with each touch if this was okay, if this was what she wanted. And Isabella answered with her body, with her hands in his hair, with the way she arched into him. They made love once, then again an hour later when neither could sleep. The second time was slower, more exploratory, punctuated by laughter when they bumped heads and quiet gasps when they found new ways to undo each other. Around 3 in the morning, they fell asleep tangled together, exhausted and content. Isabella's head rested on Gabriel's chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. She felt safe here, cherished, home. When she woke, early morning light was just beginning to grey the sky. Gabriel was still asleep beside her, one arm thrown across her waist. Isabella smiled, thinking about how peaceful he looked, how different from the polished businessman the world saw. Then she shifted and felt it. Wetness, cold now, but unmistakable. Isabella's stomach dropped. She carefully lifted the sheet and looked down. Blood, not a little, not spotting, real blood staining the expensive white sheets dark against the fabric. No, she whispered. No, no, no. Gabriel stirred beside her. Morning. Isabella was already moving, pulling the sheet tighter around herself, her mind racing. This wasn't normal. She was a nurse. She knew the difference between normal post-sex bleeding and something wrong. This was wrong. Isabella? Gabriel sat up, suddenly alert. What's... He saw the blood and went very still. All the color drained from his face. Oh my God! His voice was barely audible. Isabella, you're... I know. Her hands were shaking. She pressed one to her lower abdomen, feeling for pain. There. A dull ache she'd been too wrapped up in the night to notice. Gabriel, something's not right. He was out of bed instantly, pulling on clothes with fumbling hands. Hospital. We're going to the hospital right now. I need to... Isabella looked down at herself, at the blood, and felt panic rise in her throat. She was a medical professional. She'd seen blood, dealt with emergencies, stayed calm under pressure, but this was her body, her blood, and she was terrified. Gabriel was already on his phone, calling someone. I need a car, now, St. Joseph Regional Medical Center, emergency. He paused. I don't care if you have to wake someone up, now. He hung up and came to Isabella's side of the bed, careful not to crowd her. Can you stand? Can you walk? I think so. She tested her legs, relieved when they held. The ache in her abdomen was sharper now, impossible to ignore. "Gabriel, I'm scared." "I know, baby. I know." He helped her to the bathroom, his hands gentle but his face betraying his own terror. "We're going to figure this out. You're going to be okay." But he didn't sound convinced, and Isabella, who'd spent years reassuring patients with more confidence than she felt, couldn't find any reassurance to offer herself. She cleaned up as best she could, dressed in yesterday's clothes, her mind clinical and detached even as her body trembled. Possible causes ran through her head: cervical trauma, uterine perforation, ectopic pregnancy. No, couldn't be that. Her period had been normal last month. Endometriosis, fibroids. Something worse she didn't want to name. Gabriel appeared with a towel. "Here, in case she bled through on the way to the hospital." Isabella took it, grateful for his practicality even in crisis. The car was waiting downstairs, a black sedan with a driver who took one look at Isabella's pale face and Gabriel's wild eyes and didn't ask questions. Gabriel climbed in beside her, pulling her against him. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "Don't." Isabella's voice was sharper than she intended. "Don't do that. This isn't about fault. We should have been more careful. I should have—" "Gabriel." She looked up at him. "Stop. Whatever this is, it's not because of last night. Something was already wrong. We just triggered it." The words didn't comfort either of them. The drive to St. Joseph took 12 minutes that felt like hours. Isabella counted her breaths, assessed her pain level, monitored for dizziness or nausea. The bleeding had slowed, but hadn't stopped. That was something. Maybe. When they pulled up to the emergency entrance, Gabriel was out before the car fully stopped. He came around to help Isabella out, supporting her even though she could walk fine. A wheelchair appeared, brought by a nurse Isabella recognized from another floor. "Isabella?" The nurse's eyes widened. "What happened?" "I need an exam room, and page Dr. Morrison from GYN if she's on today." The nurse didn't ask questions. Within minutes, Isabella was in a private room, changed into a hospital gown, an IV being started by a phlebotomist who worked quickly and efficiently. Gabriel stood against the wall, looking lost and terrified. "Sir, you'll need to step out while we—" "He stays," Isabella said firmly. "He's with me." The nurse nodded and continued working. Blood draws, vital signs, a quick physical exam. Then the questions. When did the bleeding start? How much? Any pain? When was your last period? Are you sexually active? Isabella answered clinically, detached, while Gabriel stood frozen by the wall. His hands were clenched into fists, his jaw tight. She wanted to comfort him, but couldn't find the energy. Dr. Morrison arrived 20 minutes later, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. She reviewed the chart, asked more questions, then looked at Isabella seriously. "I'm ordering an ultrasound and some additional blood work, but based on what you're describing, I have a suspicion." "What?" Gabriel asked, his voice cracking. Dr. Morrison glanced at him, then back to Isabella. "Have you ever been diagnosed with endometriosis?" Isabella's breath caught. "No, but I've wondered. The cramping during periods, This could be a flare-up triggered by intercourse. The tissue can be fragile, prone to bleeding." Dr. Morrison touched Isabella's hand. "Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We'll know more after the ultrasound." The next hour was a blur of tests and waiting. The ultrasound was uncomfortable, the technician's face carefully neutral as she took measurements and images. Gabriel held Isabella's hand through all of it, silent but present. Finally, Dr. Morrison returned with results. "You have endometriosis," she said without preamble. "Moderate stage. The tissue has built up significantly, and last night's activity caused some tearing and inflammation. That's what caused the bleeding." Isabella felt tears prick her eyes, not from surprise, but from confirmation of something she'd suspected for years, but never had the time or money to investigate properly. "Is she going to be okay?" Gabriel asked. "Yes, with proper management, absolutely. We'll start you on hormone therapy to control the growth, discuss pain management options, and monitor you closely." Dr. Morrison looked between them. "This isn't life-threatening, but it does require ongoing care, and it may impact fertility down the line." The word hung in the air, fertility. Isabella couldn't look at Gabriel. "For now," Dr. Morrison continued, "you need rest. No intercourse for at least 2 weeks. We'll follow up in my office next week to discuss long-term treatment." She left them with prescriptions and instructions. When the door closed, silence fell heavy between them. "Isabella," Gabriel started. "I'm tired," she said quietly. "Can we just not talk about this right now?" He nodded, swallowing whatever he'd been about to say. They left the hospital an hour later, Isabella moving slowly, Gabriel hovering like she might shatter at any moment. The morning sun was bright and offensive, the world continuing on as if everything hadn't just shifted. In the car, Gabriel finally spoke. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For all of it. For last night, for—" "Gabriel, stop!" Isabella turned to face him, exhausted, but needing him to understand. "Last night was beautiful, perfect. I don't regret it. This just is. It was going to happen eventually, at least now we know. But the doctor said fertility—" "I heard what she said." Isabella's voice cracked. "Can we please not talk about this right now? I can't." Gabriel pulled her close, and she let herself cry against his shoulder, not just from pain or fear, but from the weight of everything. The diagnosis, the implications, the realization that their relationship had just gotten infinitely more complicated. And as Gabriel held her, staring out at the Baltimore morning, he made a silent promise. Whatever came next, whatever challenges this brought, he would face them with her. Because loving Isabella meant loving all of her, the strength and the vulnerability, the health and the complications, the joy and the pain. All of it, always. The days following the emergency room visit passed in a strange blur. Gabriel insisted Isabella stay at the penthouse where he could take care of her, and she was too exhausted to argue. He'd converted a guest room into a recovery space, fresh flowers on the nightstand, her favorite books stacked within reach, the curtains drawn to soften the harsh morning light. Isabella spent most of her time sleeping, her body demanding rest it had been denied for years. The pain medication Dr. Morrison prescribed helped, but more than that, it was the absence of pressure, no shifts to cover, no textbooks to study, no bills demanding immediate attention. Just quiet and rest, and Gabriel checking on her every few hours with food she barely touched. On the 3rd day, she felt strong enough to sit up properly. Gabriel brought her soup, homemade, not from a restaurant, and sat on the edge of the bed while she ate. "You made this?" she asked, surprised. "I can cook, a little, when I'm motivated." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He'd been like this since the hospital, careful, solicitous, but distant somehow, like he was afraid to get too close. "Talk to me," Isabella said, setting down the soup. "You've been weird for 3 days." "I'm not weird, I'm concerned." "You're blaming yourself." Gabriel looked away, confirmation enough. "Gabriel." Isabella waited until he met her eyes. "What happened wasn't your fault. Dr. Morrison said the endometriosis has probably been developing for years. We just didn't know. But if we hadn't, then I still would have had it. I just wouldn't have known. At least now I can treat it." She reached for his hand. "You didn't cause this." "The doctor said it might affect fertility," Gabriel said quietly. That's a big deal." Isabella's chest tightened. They hadn't really talked about this, about futures and children and all the things that felt too far away to be real. "It might, or it might not. She said we'd need to monitor it." "Do you want kids?" Gabriel asked suddenly. We've never talked about it. Isabella considered the question carefully. I don't know. Maybe. Someday. I've been so focused on just surviving, on getting through school and building my career, that I haven't let myself think about it. She paused. What about you? I always thought I would. With Veronica we talked about it, but he trailed off. It never felt right. The timing was always off, and then it just stopped being a conversation. And now, Gabriel looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Now I think about it all the time. I think about what our kids would look like, if they'd have your eyes or my stubborn streak, if they'd be brilliant like you or just hopelessly mediocre like me. You're not mediocre, Isabella said softly. I am compared to you. He squeezed her hand. But the point is, I want that, with you, if it's possible, and if it's not. He swallowed hard. Then we figure it out together. But I need you to know that my feelings for you aren't conditional on whether you can have children. Tears spilled down Isabella's cheeks before she could stop them. You mean that? With everything I have. She pulled him close, burying her face in his neck. They held each other for a long time, the weight of the conversation settling around them like a blanket, heavy but not suffocating. Just present. I'm scared, Isabella admitted, not just about kids, about all of it. Managing this condition, the hormone therapy, the pain. I watched the way you looked at me in the hospital, and I saw fear. Real fear. And I wondered if maybe you were thinking this is too much. That I'm too much. Gabriel pulled back, cupping her face in his hands. Isabella Marie Hart, you listen to me. You are not too much. You could never be too much. Yes, I was scared. I was terrified. But not of you or your diagnosis. I was scared of losing you. Of that blood being something worse, something untreatable. His voice broke. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me. A medical condition doesn't change that. Even if it means complications, pain, possible infertility. Even then. He kissed her forehead. We'll figure it out. Together. That's what people who love each other do. Isabella leaned into him, feeling some of the tension she'd been carrying finally release. I love you too. I don't think I've said that clearly. But I do, so much it scares me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared? Both. She laughed through her tears. Definitely both. A week later, they sat in Dr. Morrison's office for the follow-up appointment. Isabella had done her own research in the meantime, read every article, every study on endometriosis she could find. Gabriel had done the same, his browser history full of medical journals and patient forums. Dr. Morrison reviewed the ultrasound images, pointing out areas of concern. The good news is that it's manageable. We'll start you on a hormone regimen to slow the growth. Birth control pills, actually, taken continuously to suppress your cycle. No periods? Isabella asked. Ideally, yes. The less menstruation, the less the endometrial tissue can proliferate. Dr. Morrison pulled up a chart. We'll also want to schedule a laparoscopy in about 3 months. It's a minimally invasive surgery where we can remove some of the excess tissue and get a better picture of the extent. Isabella nodded, trying to absorb all the information. What about pain management? Gabriel asked. Over-the-counter anti-inflammatories should help with daily discomfort. For flare-ups, we can prescribe something stronger. Dr. Morrison looked at Isabella. The key is listening to your body. Rest when you need to. Don't push through severe pain. And yes, that means cutting back on 12-hour shifts. Isabella's stomach sank. I need those shifts. I can't afford. We'll figure out the money. Gabriel said quickly. Gabriel, we'll figure it out, he repeated, his tone brooking no argument. Dr. Morrison continued. As for fertility, it's too early to say definitively. The endometriosis does pose challenges, but many women with this condition successfully conceive. If and when you're ready to try, we'll work with a reproductive endocrinologist to optimize your chances." "And if I can't?" Isabella asked, needing to hear it said plainly. "Then there are options: IVF, surrogacy, adoption. But let's not borrow trouble from the future. Focus on managing the condition now, and we'll cross other bridges when we come to them." They left the office with prescriptions and a surgery date circled on a calendar. Isabella felt simultaneously relieved and overwhelmed. Relieved to have answers and a plan, overwhelmed by the reality of chronic illness management. "You okay?" Gabriel asked as they walked to his car. "I don't know yet." Isabella stopped, leaning against a wall. "This is just a lot. The medication, the surgery, the possibility that I might not be able to have kids. It's like my whole future just got rewritten. Or it got clarified," Gabriel offered. "You've probably had this for years, Isabella. At least now you know, now you can treat it." "You're very calm about this." "I'm not calm, I'm terrified." He stepped closer. "But I'm also determined. Determined to support you through this. Determined to make sure you get the care you need. Determined to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." Isabella looked up at him, this man who'd entered her life in a coffee shop and somehow become her anchor. "What did I do to deserve you?" "You sat at my table when you didn't have to." Gabriel smiled. "And you kept sitting there day after day, even when you learned I'd been less than honest. That's more than I deserve. We're quite the pair, aren't we? Both thinking we don't deserve the other. Maybe that's what makes it work." They drove back to the penthouse in comfortable silence. Isabella had started thinking of it as their space now, rather than just Gabriel's. Her textbooks were stacked on the coffee table, her scrubs hung in the closet, small pieces of her life integrating with his. That evening, Gabriel made dinner. Pasta again, because it was one of the few things he could make reliably. And they ate on the couch while watching a documentary about architecture that Gabriel had been wanting to show her. "Can I ask you something?" Isabella said during a lull in the narration. "Always. Are you disappointed about the fertility thing?" Gabriel paused the documentary and turned to face her fully. "I'm sad that you might face challenges. I'm sad that your body is causing you pain. But disappointed? No. Never. Because having children was never the reason I fell in love with you. But you said you wanted them, with me. I do. But wanting something and needing it are different. I need you, Isabella. Kids would be a gift. But you're the essential part of that equation." Isabella felt tears threaten again. She'd been crying so much lately, the hormones and stress making her more emotional than usual. What if I said I don't want to try? What if managing this condition is enough, and adding pregnancy to it feels like too much? Gabriel considered this seriously. Then we don't try. We find other ways to build our family if that's what we want. Or we don't, and we build an incredible life, just the two of us. Either way, I'm in. Just like that? Just like that. He pulled her close. "Isabella, I spent years in a marriage where we made plans based on what we thought we should want, not what we actually wanted. I'm not doing that again. I want to build a life based on honesty about our desires, our fears, our limitations. If kids happen, amazing. If they don't, we'll be okay." Isabella rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I think I want to try. Eventually. When I'm healthier, when we're more stable, but the pressure of it, the idea that my body might not cooperate, then we try without pressure. We live our lives, we manage your health, and if pregnancy happens, it happens. And if it doesn't, we adjust." He kissed the top of her head. "The only non-negotiable is you and me. Everything else is just details. Even expensive, complicated, possibly heartbreaking details." Even then, they sat together as the documentary continued, the narrator describing the intricate beauty of Gothic cathedrals. Isabella felt something settle inside her, not peace exactly, but acceptance. Her body had its limitations. Her future held uncertainties. But Gabriel wasn't going anywhere, and maybe, just maybe, that was enough. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not running. For not looking at me differently. For being here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be." Gabriel tightened his arm around her. "You're stuck with me now, endometriosis and all." Isabella smiled against his shoulder. "I think I can live with that." Outside the windows, Baltimore glittered in the darkness, a city of millions, each with their own struggles and triumphs, their own private battles and small victories. Somewhere out there were people facing diagnoses, making hard choices, learning to love despite complications. Isabella and Gabriel were just two more people in that vast sea, trying to figure it out as they went. But they were figuring it out together, and that made all the difference. The morning after the follow-up appointment, Isabella woke to find Gabriel sitting at the kitchen island with 2 steaming cups of coffee and a notebook. He looked up when she padded in, still wearing his t-shirt from the night before. "Morning," he said, sliding a cup toward her. "We need to talk." Isabella's stomach dropped. Those words never preceded anything good. "Okay." "Not that kind of talk." Gabriel smiled, reading her expression. "A planning talk. Sit." She sat, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. "Planning what?" "Us. The next 6 months." He opened the notebook, revealing pages of neat handwriting. "I've been thinking about what Dr. Morrison said about you cutting back on shifts, managing stress, taking care of yourself. And I've been thinking about what you said at the Hales' dinner, about not wanting to lose yourself in my world." "Gabriel." "Let me finish." He held up a hand. "I have a proposal, a 6-month experiment, where we deliberately build a life that belongs to both of us, not yours or mine, but ours." Isabella leaned forward, intrigued despite her wariness. "What does that look like?" Gabriel flipped to a page covered in bullet points. "First, your health. You cut back to 3 12-hour shifts a week instead of 4 or 5. The income difference I cover. Before you argue," he added quickly as Isabella opened her mouth, "this isn't charity. This is an investment in your well-being, which directly impacts our relationship. I need you healthy and not burnt out." "That feels like a gift from someone who loves you?" "Because that's what it is." His eyes held hers. "Isabella, I have more money than I can spend in 3 lifetimes. Helping you maintain a sustainable work schedule while managing a chronic illness isn't me trying to control you. It's me trying to be a good partner." Isabella bit her lip, fighting the instinct to refuse. But he was right. She'd been running herself ragged for years, and the endometriosis only made it worse. "Okay, what else?" "Second, we split our time between your apartment and the penthouse, equal time in each space. That way neither of us feels displaced." He made a note. "Though honestly, your radiator is going to drive me insane, so maybe we look into getting that fixed." Isabella laughed despite herself. "It has character. It has a death wish." But Gabriel was smiling. "Third, and this is important, I want to be part of your world, really part of it, not just visiting when convenient, but involved." "What does that mean?" Gabriel leaned back. "I've been doing some research. St. Joseph has a volunteer program. Administrative support, patient services, that kind of thing. I want to apply." Isabella stared at him. "You want to volunteer at my hospital?" "Why not? I have flexible hours. I can spare a day or 2 a week, and I want to understand your world better, the people you work with, the environment you're in. What draws you to this work?" He paused. "Plus, Richard's been on me about corporate social responsibility. This kills 2 birds with 1 stone. Gabriel Mercer, CEO and millionaire, wants to volunteer at an urban hospital. Is that so hard to believe?" "Kind of, yeah." But Isabella was smiling now, warmth spreading through her chest. "What would you even do?" "Whatever they need. File paperwork, stock supplies, escort patients. I don't care, I just want to be useful in a way that matters. Isabella reached across the island and took his hand. You're serious about this? Completely. Which brings me to point 4. Gabriel squeezed her hand. I want you to come to some of my work functions. Not the stuffy galas. I'll spare you most of those. But the actual work. Site visits, design meetings, the parts of my job that I actually care about. I want you to see what I do when I light up about architecture instead of just signing checks. You want to share your worlds, Isabella said, understanding. I want to build one world. Together. Gabriel pulled out another page. I made a list of things we could do. Classes we could take, places we could explore, habits we could build. 6 months of deliberately creating something that's uniquely ours. Isabella scanned the list, her eyes widening. Cooking classes, weekend trips to nearby cities, a book club for 2, volunteering together at a food bank, morning runs, learning to salsa dance. Some items made her laugh. Master the art of pancakes was circled 3 times. Others made her chest tight with emotion. Visit Isabella's parents in Pennsylvania and create a 5-year plan, flexible but intentional. This is... She looked up at him, struggling for words. This is incredibly thoughtful. This is me trying to be worthy of you. Gabriel's voice was soft. I know the last few weeks have been hard. The diagnosis, the fear, the uncertainty. But I don't want us to just survive this. I want us to use it as a foundation. To build something so solid that whatever comes next, we can handle it. Isabella felt tears spill over, but for once they were happy tears. 6 months. 6 months. And then we reassess. Figure out what's working, what's not. Talk about the future without the immediate crisis hanging over us. And at the end of 6 months? Gabriel's expression turned serious. At the end of 6 months, if we're both still all in, I'm going to ask you to marry me. Isabella's breath caught. Gabriel, I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring things out, but I also know that I've never been more certain of anything in my life. He came around the island, kneeling in front of her chair. I'm not asking now. I'm telling you what's in my heart, so you have time to think, to decide if this is what you want too. No pressure, no expectation, just honesty. Isabella cupped his face, feeling the roughness of morning stubble, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. You're going to make me cry before I've even finished my coffee. Is that a yes to the 6-month plan? It's a yes to all of it. The plan, the future, the terrifying leap into the unknown. She kissed him softly. Let's build our world, Gabriel. The 6 months that followed were unlike anything either of them had experienced. Gabriel started volunteering at St. Joseph 2 days a week. At first, the staff didn't know what to make of him. This clearly wealthy man in designer jeans, filing charts and restocking supply closets. But Gabriel showed up consistently, asked questions, learned names, and slowly became just another fixture in the ICU hallway. Isabella watched him bond with the hospital porter Marcus over their shared love of basketball, watched him learn medical terminology so he could better understand the charts he filed, watched him sit with a patient's family in the waiting room, just being present while they waited for news. Your boyfriend's weird, Maria, another ICU nurse, told Isabella one day, but in a good way. He brought donuts for the night shift last week. Good ones from that fancy place downtown. That's Gabriel, Isabella said, unable to keep the pride from her voice. For her part, Isabella started attending Gabriel's site visits. She'd been nervous at first. What did she know about real estate development? But Gabriel was patient, explaining every detail, showing her blueprints, teaching her to see the potential in empty lots and half-built structures. This is going to be mixed use, he explained at a site in Federal Hill. Commercial on the ground floor, affordable housing above. We're partnering with the city to ensure 30% of units are below market rate. Affordable housing? Isabella looked at him in surprise. I didn't know you did that. I've been trying to do more. Richard thinks I'm crazy. The profit margins are smaller. But watching you work with patients who can't afford their medications, who delay care because of cost," he shrugged, "made me think about what my buildings actually contribute. If they're just making rich people richer, what's the point?" Isabella kissed him right there, hard hat and all, not caring who saw. They took cooking classes on Thursday nights, a beginning Italian cuisine course where they were easily the worst students. Their gnocchi came out gummy, their risotto burnt, their tiramisu a soggy disaster. They laughed until they cried and went out for pizza afterward. They visited Isabella's parents in Pennsylvania on a chilly November weekend. Her father, Frank, a gruff man with permanently oil-stained hands, was skeptical at first. But after Gabriel spent 2 hours helping him rebuild a carburetor, something Gabriel had learned from YouTube videos the week before, Frank softened. "He's not what I expected," Frank told Isabella while Gabriel was in the bathroom. "But he looks at you right, like you hung the moon." Her mother, Patricia, was easier. She hugged Gabriel within 5 minutes of meeting him and spent the weekend showing him embarrassing childhood photos while Isabella protested. "She was such a serious little thing," Patricia said, pointing to a photo of 8-year-old Isabella in a nurse costume. "Even then, she wanted to save everyone." Gabriel looked at the photo, then at adult Isabella, his expression soft. Some things don't change. They started running together in the mornings, slow, easy jogs along the harbour. Isabella had never been athletic, but something about moving through the city as it woke up, Gabriel beside her, felt meditative. They'd stop for coffee after, sweaty and breathless, and it became one of her favourite parts of the day. The endometriosis management continued. Some days were harder than others. Isabella had flare-ups that left her curled in bed, heating pad pressed to her abdomen, while Gabriel sat nearby reading aloud from whatever book she was currently obsessed with. He learned to recognize the signs, the way she'd move more carefully, the tightness around her eyes, and adjusted their plans without making a fuss about it. "We can reschedule," he'd say about cancelled dinners or missed events. "Your health comes first." The surgery in January was minor, but still scary. Gabriel held her hand until the anesthesia pulled her under, and he was the first face she saw when she woke up, groggy and uncomfortable, but alive. "Doctor, Morrison says it went well," he told her, brushing hair from her forehead. "They removed more tissue than expected, but your organs look healthy. This should help with the pain." It did. The recovery took 2 weeks, and Gabriel transformed into a nurse himself, managing medications, monitoring her incision sites, bringing her soup and bad movies. Isabella had never been good at accepting help, but she found herself surrendering to it, letting Gabriel care for her the way she'd cared for so many patients. "This is nice," she admitted one afternoon, "being taken care of." "Get used to it," Gabriel said. "I plan on doing this for the next 60 years. They had hard conversations too. About money. Gabriel wanting to pay off her student loans. Isabella resisting until they compromised on him matching whatever she paid each month. About the future. Fertility specialists they might consult. Adoption they might pursue. The very real possibility they might remain childless. "I think I'm okay with it," Isabella said one night, "not having kids. If it doesn't happen, I love my work, I love our life, that feels like enough." "More than enough," Gabriel agreed, "though I reserve the right to change my mind if we meet a kid in need of a home." Deal. They fought too. Real fights, not just disagreements. About Isabella working too much despite her promises. About Gabriel trying to solve problems with money instead of listening. About whose family they'd visit for Christmas. But they learned to fight fair. No low blows, no walking away, no letting things fester. They'd learned that from Isabella's parents, who'd been married 40 years and still bickered about the thermostat, but never went to bed angry. As spring arrived, turning Baltimore green and hopeful, Isabella realized something profound. She was happy. Not just content, not just surviving, but genuinely, deeply happy. The endometriosis was manageable. Her work felt sustainable. Gabriel had become not just her partner, but her home. One evening in late April, sitting on the rooftop of the penthouse watching the sunset, Gabriel turned to her. 6 months, he said quietly. Isabella's heart kicked up. Has it been? As of yesterday. He took her hand. I want to ask you something, but before I do, I need to know, are you happy? Really happy? Not just making it work, but actually glad you chose this life with me? Isabella looked at him, this man who'd transformed from a stranger in a coffee shop into the person who knew her best, who'd held her through pain and celebrated her victories, who'd entered her world and welcomed her into his, who'd proven day after day that love wasn't about grand gestures, but consistent presence. I'm the happiest I've ever been, she said honestly, even with the complications, the challenges, the uncertainty, because I'm facing all of it with you. Gabriel smiled, and it was like the sun coming out. Good, because I have a question for you, but not yet. Not yet? Not yet. He kissed her hand. Soon. But there's one more thing we need to do first. Isabella raised an eyebrow. What's that? You'll see. And as the Baltimore sky turned pink and gold above them, Isabella realized she trusted him, completely, with her heart, her future, her whole messy, beautiful life. Whatever came next, they'd face it together, just like they'd promised. 2 weeks after their rooftop conversation, Gabriel told Isabella to pack a bag for the weekend. He wouldn't say where they were going, only that she should bring comfortable clothes and an open mind. I hate surprises, Isabella said, though she was already pulling out her overnight bag. You're going to like this one. Gabriel's eyes held a mischief she'd learned to recognize and love. They drove north, leaving Baltimore behind for rolling Pennsylvania hills. Isabella watched the landscape change through the window, spring blooming across fields and forests. After 2 hours, Gabriel turned onto a familiar road. Wait, Isabella said, sitting up straighter. Are we going to see your parents? Yes. Gabriel, you should have told me. I would have called ahead and warned them, which would have defeated the purpose. He glanced at her, his expression turning serious. I need to talk to your father, and I wanted you there when I did. Isabella's heart started pounding. Gabriel, trust me? She nodded, throat suddenly tight. They pulled up to the modest 2-story house Isabella had grown up in. The garden was exploding with spring flowers, her mother's pride. Before they could even get out of the car, the front door opened, and Patricia came rushing out, apron still tied around her waist. Isabella! Gabriel! What a wonderful surprise! She hugged them both, smelling like cinnamon and vanilla. Frank! They're here! Frank emerged more slowly, wiping his hands on a rag. His eyes went to Gabriel, assessing, and Isabella saw something pass between them, some masculine understanding she wasn't privy to. Son, Frank said with a nod. Sir? Gabriel shook his hand firmly. Thank you for having us. Always welcome. Frank's gaze softened when it landed on Isabella. Looking healthy, sweetheart. Feeling good, Dad. Isabella hugged him, breathing in motor oil and Old Spice. They went inside, where Patricia had somehow already laid out coffee and fresh-baked cookies. They sat around the kitchen table, the same one Isabella had done homework at, had family dinners at, had learned what commitment looked like by watching her parents navigate 40 years of marriage. After small talk and catching up, Gabriel cleared his throat. Frank, Patricia, there's actually a reason I wanted to come today. Isabella reached for his hand under the table. I wanted to ask for your blessing, Gabriel continued, his voice steady, but his hand trembling slightly in Isabella's grip. To marry your daughter. The kitchen went silent. Patricia's eyes immediately filled with tears. Frank leaned back in his chair, studying Gabriel with that same assessing look. You love her? Frank asked bluntly. More than anything in this world. She's got health issues, endometriosis, might not be able to have kids. I know. We're managing it together. She's stubborn, independent to a fault, won't let you solve her problems for her. I wouldn't want her any other way. Frank was quiet for a long moment. Then, what do you do when she's hurting? When the condition flares up? Gabriel didn't hesitate. I sit with her. I don't try to fix what can't be fixed. I just make sure she knows she's not alone. Something shifted in Frank's expression. He looked at Isabella, a question in his eyes. She nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Then you have my blessing, Frank said gruffly. But you hurt her, and we're going to have problems. Don't care how much money you have. Fair enough, sir. Patricia was openly crying now. Oh, this is wonderful. Isabella, honey, are you happy? So happy, Mom. Isabella wiped at her own tears. So incredibly happy. Patricia got up to hug them both, laughing through her tears. We need to celebrate. Frank, open that bottle of wine we've been saving. Oh my goodness, our little girl is getting married. He hasn't actually asked me yet, Isabella pointed out, laughing. He will, Patricia said with absolute certainty. A man doesn't drive 2 hours to ask permission from parents unless he's serious. They spent the rest of the afternoon celebrating. Frank broke out the good wine, a bottle they'd been saving for something special. Patricia started talking about wedding plans until Isabella gently reminded her they hadn't even gotten engaged yet. But the joy in the small kitchen was palpable, infectious. As the sun began to set, Gabriel and Isabella took a walk through the neighborhood. Past the playground where Isabella had skinned her knees learning to roller skate. Past the corner store where she'd bought candy with her allowance. Past all the markers of a childhood that had shaped her into the woman she'd become. Thank you, Isabella said, breaking the comfortable silence, for asking them, for doing this the right way. I want to do everything the right way with you. Gabriel stopped walking, turning to face her. Your parents, they're good people, Isabella. They built something real, something lasting. That's what I want for us. Me too. They walked back as twilight painted the sky purple and pink. Inside, Patricia insisted they stay for dinner, pot roast that had been slow cooking all day. They ate family style, passing dishes and telling stories. Gabriel fit seamlessly into the dynamic, teasing Isabella's mother about her cookie recipe, debating baseball with her father. Watching him, Isabella understood why he'd wanted to come here. This was him joining her family, not just dating their daughter. This was him proving he was in it for the long haul. After dinner, as they prepared to drive back to Baltimore, Patricia pulled Isabella aside in the kitchen. He's a good one, she said quietly. Better than I expected when you first told us about him. Better than I expected too, Isabella admitted. The money doesn't scare you. It did. Sometimes it still does. But the man behind the money, that's who I love. And he's worked hard to show me they're not the same thing. Patricia hugged her daughter tightly. Then I'm happy for you, sweetheart. So very happy. The drive back to Baltimore was quiet, both of them processing the day. But it was a comfortable quiet, the kind that didn't need filling. Back at the penthouse, Isabella expected Gabriel to finally propose, but he didn't. He just held her on the couch, both of them exhausted from the emotional day, and whispered, "Soon." "You're killing me with the suspense," Isabella said. "Good things are worth waiting for." 3 days later, on a Thursday evening, Gabriel picked Isabella up after her shift. Instead of heading home, he drove to the inner harbor. "Where are we going?" Isabella asked. "You'll see." He parked near the water and led her along the harbor walk. The sun was setting, casting everything in golden light. Tourists and locals strolled by, enjoying the spring evening. Gabriel stopped at a bench, their bench, the one near the harbor brew café, where they'd had coffee after their museum date, where they'd talked about futures and fears. "Sit with me?" Gabriel asked. Isabella sat, her heart beginning to race. "This is where it started," Gabriel said, looking out over the water. "This harbour, this city, a rainy afternoon and a crowded café. I was drowning in my own emptiness, and then you walked in." "Gabriel, let me finish." He took her hands. "You could have sat anywhere that day, could have left after 5 minutes, but you stayed, and you kept staying even when it got complicated, even when I screwed up and hid who I was, even when your body betrayed you and the future got uncertain." Tears were already streaming down Isabella's face. "You are the strongest, most compassionate, most genuine person I have ever known. You make me want to be better, not richer or more successful. I've got plenty of that. Better as a human being, more present, more honest, more real." Gabriel slid off the bench and knelt on one knee. From his pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. "Isabella Marie Hart, I am standing in front of you, kneeling in front of you, as my truest self, flawed and scared and desperately in love with you. I don't know what the future holds. I don't know if we'll have children or if it'll just be us. I don't know if your condition will get better or if we'll have to keep fighting it. But I know that I want to face all of it with you." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond on a platinum band. Nothing ostentatious. Perfect. "Will you marry me? Will you build this wild, messy, beautiful life with me?" Isabella was sobbing now, nodding before she could even speak. "Yes, yes, of course, yes." Gabriel slipped the ring on her finger with shaking hands. Then he stood and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off the ground, spinning her once as people around them started clapping. When he set her down, they were both laughing and crying, foreheads pressed together. "I love you," Isabella whispered. "I love you more." Not possible. They stood there holding each other as the sun set over Baltimore Harbor, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something worth keeping. That night, back at the penthouse, they lay in bed talking about the future, not with fear this time, but with hope. "When should we get married?" Gabriel asked, playing with Isabella's hair. "I don't know. Next spring, maybe. Give us time to plan something small. Your mum's going to want a big wedding. Your business partners are going to expect a big wedding." They looked at each other and laughed. "What if we did both?" Gabriel suggested. "A small ceremony for us, just family and close friends, and then a larger reception for everyone else?" "I like that. The important moment stays intimate." "Exactly." Gabriel pulled her closer. "I was thinking, after the wedding, maybe we take some time, travel a bit, decompress before jumping into whatever comes next." "Where would we go?" "Anywhere you want. Italy, Greece, Scotland, or we stay local, road trip through New England. Doesn't matter as long as I'm with you." Isabella smiled against his chest. "I vote for Italy. I want to eat real gnocchi to make up for our cooking class disasters." "Deal." They talked late into the night, making plans and dreaming dreams. Not all of it would work out the way they hoped. They both knew that. Life had a way of complicating even the best-laid plans. But they'd proven they could handle complications together. As Isabella drifted off to sleep, her ring catching the moonlight streaming through the windows, she thought about the woman she'd been a year ago. Exhausted, isolated, convinced she had to do everything alone. That woman wouldn't recognize this life, this love, this partnership, this sense of home she'd found in another person. And Gabriel, holding his fiancée close, thought about the man he'd been. Hollow despite his success, going through the motions of a life that meant nothing. He'd built an empire, but had no one to share it with. Now he had everything that mattered. The city sparkled below them, millions of lights representing millions of lives, all interconnected in ways seen and unseen. Somewhere out there, other people were falling in love, making plans, taking chances on each other. But for Gabriel and Isabella, there was only this moment, this room, This promise of a future they'd build together, brick by brick, day by day, through sickness and health, through fear and hope, through all the complications and joys that life would bring. They'd started in a coffee shop on a rainy afternoon, and they'd spend the rest of their lives grateful for that one empty chair, that one moment of chance, that one decision to sit down and stay. Because sometimes, that's all it takes. One moment, one choice. One person who sees you, really sees you, and decides you're worth the risk, and everything else follows. In the end, Isabella and Gabriel's story wasn't about wealth bridging poverty or love conquering illness. It was about two people who chose each other. Repeatedly, deliberately, through every complication life threw their way. Gabriel learned that true richness had nothing to do with buildings or bank accounts. Isabella discovered that accepting love didn't mean losing herself. Together, they built something neither could have created alone, a partnership rooted in honesty, strengthened by adversity, and sustained by the simple choice to keep showing up. Sometimes the greatest love stories don't begin with fireworks. They begin with a single empty chair, a rainy afternoon, and the courage to say yes to a stranger. And maybe that's the real magic, not finding someone perfect, but finding someone willing to build something beautiful from the imperfect pieces you both bring. What if the love you're searching for is just one brave conversation away? If this story touched your heart, leave your like and tell us. Do you prefer longer, detailed stories like this one, or shorter, more direct narratives? Subscribe to the channel and comment where you're listening from. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Thank you for being here.